hey, let's just throw everything out there, anything against the wall, any idea, and then see what happens. And you guys also have a very safe place to do that. And we're able just to like come up with things that maybe we otherwise wouldn't. Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. I have a guest today. One of my VIPs, my very important persons. This is Nell Stortz, who is also Director of Operations here at Team Allwood. Is also a friend, is also one of the smartest people I know. Thanks for coming on the podcast with me.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are a crowd favorite. Who do you think people like more? You or my husband?
Oh, Jason. Jason wins, hands down.
Do you think?
I'm sure.
It's only because he's a hot mess, right?
Oh, everyone loves him. I was just thinking the first time I was ever on your podcast was 2018.
Okay, was that the one we did about like
back in my vendor days?
Yes, vendor. That particular podcast episode did amazing.
Yeah,
you weren't working for me then, right?
No, I was just a client of yours.
You were a client. Okay.
I was
client
by Jennifer Allwood. Yeah.
Okay, team player. I love that. Yeah. That's still, I think, one of our most downloaded episodes.
I think it's in the top 10 for sure.
So I'm wondering if I should do an interview next week with Jason, and then we'll see which of you have more downloads.
Come on, guys. I want it to be me. I will start driving.
Nell versus Mr. Magic. Nell for president. Okay. We're talking about a type of meeting, friends, that we have here at Team Allwood today. And I invited Nell to come onto the podcast with me because I'm kind of feeling like we need to do, this is going to be one of two parts. So Nell runs all of our team meetings here at Team Allwood. That's a lot of the word team. And we have team meetings weekly. And I feel like we need to do a podcast episode that basically would be just me shutting up and letting Nell talk, because I don't come to 3/4 of our team meetings. I come once a month, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And we could kind of talk about that on that podcast. But if you're watching on YouTube and you would love for Nell to do a podcast on how she runs our team meetings and kind of her format and why she does what she does, like, let me know in the comments. If you're on Instagram, send me a DM there, and we can make that happen. But today we're talking about like a different type of team meeting. So I was just sharing with Nell the other day that I thought I was the brilliant one that came up with this word. I did. Like, do I have a very inflated opinion of my brilliance? Because in my head, I named this. We're talking about no judgment zone meetings. Or did you think you named it? Or did either of us know that the internet already had this as a thing?
I think you named it, but someone just named it before you and you didn't know, and that's okay.
Okay. So you also thought that it was me that came up with it.
Sure.
Kind of.
Collective group. We just like to have times where here's how it started. Because you like to give us wild ideas. And I think in order to like preface it and like make sure that I know, like, you're like, hey, this is a wild idea, but I just want to say it anyway. You say, okay, no judgment zone, right? And so that's where it started. Like, we would just be in a meeting and you would be like, okay, no judgment. And then you would say something. And then sometimes I'll do it. And I'll be like, okay, no judgment. Let me just say this thing. And so it's like, helps like put the other person like, okay, what I'm about to say is going to be wild. So just be ready.
Right. And so then how long ago do you think did we actually decide to like put it on the calendar that we were having like a no judgment zone meeting about a particular topic? Like,
yeah, like in the last year or so.
That's what they do.
Where it's like, we're just going to get together for an hour and we are just going to say all of the wild thoughts that we have on a particular topic. And everyone has to listen and
nobody gets to critique. Yeah. And so it really is just like a type of brainstorming meeting, for lack of a better way to put it. And again, I didn't realize that this was already a thing, but I wanted you to come on, Nell, just so we could kind of talk about what we do in those no judgment zone meetings. When should the people that are listening here maybe have a non-judgment zone meeting? How should they run one? And then what if it's just them? Like, what if they don't have a team of people like I do? Should they still on occasion do this type of like brainstorming? And how is it beneficial? And so that's what I wanted to talk about, and in no particular order, but I did, a podcast episode just a few weeks ago, which I'm going to plug again now because not enough people have listened to it. And I'm seriously like, did you listen to my podcast about why do we have our best ideas in the shower?
Yeah.
Okay.
Was I smart? A lot of research. You were very smart and you did a lot of research.
Okay. I feel like I researched the heck out of that for months. I was like, Lord, what is this thing between me and water and ideas? And why do we have our best ideas in the shower? And so I researched it. I felt like I did a good job of combining like the Bible and combining biology and, scripture and science. And then it's had like 4 downloads.
So everyone help us out. Go give Jen a listen on that one. But that what episode is that one?
It's number 424,
424.
and it's got thousands of downloads at this point, I'm sure, but still, I'm like, that was really good. So on that episode, I talk about how, or why we get some of our like best ideas in the shower. And there's like, I'm not going to recap it here, but there are reasons why in the shower, while you're driving in the car, you kind of go into like a nothing zone almost. And then like things can like float into your brain. Well, sometimes we don't have like, we have a particular issue or a particular challenge, if you will, or something that we're trying to decide upon here at Team Allwood. And so we're like, we've got to come up with something. We either have to go, off in this direction or this direction, or we have to launch this thing, but how do we want to change it? Or we've got to decide between doing this and that. And so on occasion, we will call no judgment zone meetings that basically just mean we're going to brainstorm the heck out of that particular topic. And nobody gets to like give a lot of feedback or say why it won't work. I love these meetings, and I'm going to tell you why, because I do have a lot of thoughts that run through my brain at any given time. And this is not in my notes, but the Holy Spirit's just reminding me of this. And so remember that time, Nell, that we as a team worked with that gentleman that I was introduced to from Lisa Bevere,
Yep.
and I'm trying to think of his name, Lyle.
Uh-huh.
Sound right? Lyle.
Yes. Yes.
And he helps like teammates interact well together. And so he did like this whole study on our team, and in particular you and I. And remember, he said like we're a match made in heaven. Like you and I, we are powerful. But he also had some feedback, which was, Jennifer, you tend to come in like a tornado, and your team needs you to be more of a hurricane. And I'm like,
we need to know it's coming. We need to know it's coming. We need to have time to prepare.
Time to prepare, because he's like, on a tornado, you just come in and you level everyone with your ideas, with your thoughts, with your like, we could do this and this and this. He's like, and in your team, in their brilliance and in their goodness, is trying to keep up with you and wanting to make you happy and wanting to do all the things and getting excited also. But then they're also like worn out and they don't know what thing to focus on first. And it's like I come in like a wrecking ball. By the way, remember that song from Miley Cyrus?
Yes.
One of my closest friends, who I will not call out publicly, but whose initials are LS. Okay. She thought that the lyrics to that song were, I came in like a rainbow. And I'm like, have you
seen the video? Because she is not riding a rainbow.
That's definitely not a rainbow. That's a wrecking ball. I still laugh at that anytime. So anyhow, he's like, you need to slow your roll. Like with a hurricane, we know a week in advance, 2 weeks in advance that things are coming out. So I feel like one of the things that is helpful about our no judgment zone meetings is I feel like they kind of check the box of, I'm basically saying to you guys, hey, let's just throw everything out there, anything against the wall, any idea, and then see what happens. And you guys also have a very safe place to do that. And we're able just to like come up with things that maybe we otherwise wouldn't. I mean, tell me, is that kind of, tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah. And we have some time. So I'll just start to give some ideas too. So for one, we set a time limit, like when it's going to be, and it's very good. We do these over Zoom versus sometimes, because we do a lot of team communication over Voxer, but these really need to be face-to-face, and we really need to be a set time. So we try to do them like for 45 minutes or an hour. And we start with notes ahead of time. I think that's really helpful too, because it's like, we can help kind of, here's what I'm thinking, and we're already starting to put ideas out. So in the shower that morning before the meeting, it's like, I know we're coming up with one of these. What are some of my wild ideas that I want to kind of have prepared and be ready for? And so everyone knows what's coming. Everyone knows, no one's blindsided because we already know what the meeting's called. We know what it's coming up with, and we've already started to share some of those ideas. So that's kind of the initial getting started of it.
Yes. So like earlier this week, we had a no judgment zone meeting about what new thing could we launch like in the next quarter? What new thing do our followers and our clients want, need? What would look like fun for us? And what would look like a win, for our clients? And so when I say we're throwing everything out on the table, it's like, teach them about VRBOs, teach them about DIY, go back to teaching creatives how to make money online. We could relaunch this. We could come up, like, I'm talking, there is a long list of ideas, the majority of which we will never do. They will never come to fruition. But I think just like human nature, I think in most team meetings is to like reserve some of your thoughts and opinions and ideas for fear that things are going to be like shot down, or that somebody is going to say, okay, that's not going to work because. And so what I think is important to remember is that if you have like a non-judgment zone meeting, maybe it's not the idea that I give in the meeting that will be the winner, but it's like I give an idea and you're like, ooh, 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 and you kind of volley off that. And then that leads to Mackenzie have an idea. And then that leads back to you. You know what I'm saying? And then suddenly we have like this idea that was sparked by an idea, sparked by an idea.
Yeah.
But it's also like, it feels like a safe zone.
Uh-huh. I was just gonna say, it feels, I love this word. It's also very cathartic because it's like every thought you've had on this topic, you can just say it now. So like
Right.
if there's you know, and we are gonna talk about this in a minute, but if you're alone, like if you're a one-man show, one-woman show, you can still do this yourself, but sometimes it's letting yourself like say the thing that you've not wanted to say out loud.
100%.
It's like once, like maybe there's a certain offer that you're doing and you hate this one piece of it, or maybe you sold something for a certain price and you're so mad at yourself that you sold it for that price, or maybe you decided to take on this revenue stream or this business partner or something, you know, and it's like, and now you feel trapped and now you feel stuck. And sometimes just verbalizing that is the first step to fixing it.
Is really
and
free.
so it's really cathartic to get that out. And that's one of the things you can do in this. And it ranges from like burn the business down to, you know what I mean? Like quit everything to go all in this one area. Like it's the whole gamut.
Which I love, love, love. And I think like, especially for me, since I have a lot of open tabs in my brain, I do have a lot of ideas as a typical creative. And I don't lack ideas. I feel like it's a safe place for me to kind of get those out of my brain, because I did do that podcast one time and I would have to go back to look it up, but it was basically a podcast on like closing loops.
Mhm.
And sometimes like things run through my brain over and over. Like Jason has been drawing this to my attention lately. He's like, babe, you're getting stuck on, cause I'll keep asking him the same thing. Did you get Ari signed up for swim lessons yet? Wait, have we signed up Ari for swim lessons yet? I think we still need to sign up Ari. Like I'll get stuck on a thing and I have to have something that closes it. And sometimes what closes a loop on something is just actually, like you said, getting it out of my head and out of my mouth into words. And then usually somebody on the team is just making notes. And the notes are, crazy, and they're just writing down the ideas. And then we're able to, at another time, like kind of come back and go through those. But I do think that sometimes we get stuck in this rut of thinking, okay, I only have two options to any given challenge in my business. I continue this program this way, or I just stop it altogether, or I launch this, or I launch that, or I either sell products or I write a book. And so I do think when you have a non-judgment zone meeting that you can sometimes like figure out, okay, is there some combo? Is there some weird, hybrid that you haven't even thought of yet, where you combine a little piece of this and a little piece of that, and you're able to like create something new? Is that a good way to explain that?
Yeah. I think we also have these things we tell ourselves of why all these other things won't work, or this has to be. Have you ever been like part of an organization and you come in and they've like, oh, well, this is how we've done it for years. And you're like, but why? It doesn't have to be like that. And so, and to do that for your own business, like maybe there's a certain product you've sold the same way for so many years. And in your mind, you have to do it that way. Because this is what people expect, or this is what people want, you think, or this is how you've always done it. And like opening your mind to letting yourself go into another direction just can be so freeing. Of like, you might have sold something for the last 10 years for $47. That does not mean you have to keep selling it for $47.
Right.
That doesn't even mean you have having to keep selling. Like there's so many options for every, challenge.
This is like triggering me a tiny bit because sidebar, sidebars are my favorite. So, we have the vacation rental, we have the one in Florida and the one in Arizona, and we have an SUV at both places. Well, when I was just in Florida, Jason and I decided we're going to, because we let all of our friends drive that SUV while they're down there. It literally sits in the parking lot all the time. Well, as you know, if things aren't driven on a regular basis, they tend to, get a little stiffer, whatever. It's just like when I don't work out. And so anyway, I'm like, okay, I literally interviewed the VP of Turo on my podcast. Like, why are we not putting this vehicle on Turo? And in our head, we've been like, we're not going to put on Turo because we don't have somebody in Florida that can like take it to people at the airport or take it back to where it needs to be. And so Jason and I, we just keep kind of following thoughts. And I was like, well, why do we have to have that though? Why couldn't we just like keep it like people have to find a way from the airport to our house and then they can rent the place? And Jason's like, and then maybe we should just allow only the people who are renting our place to rent the vehicle. And I'm like, that's perfect. That's a great, like, so we're volleying off each other's ideas. So I email like our management company and I'm like, okay, so we're going to put our vehicle on Turo, and when people rent the property, I'd like for you to put in an email that, hey, you can rent the Turo too. And immediately he's like, no. And I'm like, but wait a second, why not? And he's telling me why he doesn't think that it'll work, because they're going to get phone calls in the middle of the night if the truck breaks down. I'm like, then you just tell them. You'd get a phone call if the refrigerator broke down, but you just tell them, call me. The churro stuff is all through us. And then he's like, well, no, because, and in my head, I was like, he's just shutting it down so quickly without thinking through other possibilities, because they could take a percentage of that churro revenue. Like if they were to sit and have a non-judgment zone meeting, because it's exactly like what you said, they've never done this before. So therefore they're automatically coming up with all the reasons why it won't work. And the beauty of a no judgment zone meeting is that we never do that. We never talk about why it won't work.
Right. So. And I think the other part of it is when you say nothing is off the table, like you don't, this is not the time to think how it could work. Right. Like, this is just getting the ideas out there. And then there's the, like, just as far as the process goes, there's a follow-up where then we go through the list and like start editing and how could we make this work? And that's where you wait a day, give everyone 24 hours to like kind of marinate with all of those ideas, which ones made the most sense. When we're all on, like, I do all some of my best thinking when I'm on my nightly walk, you know this, because sometimes we're voxering each other when we're walking at night. And I'm like, oh, but we could do this. But it's just, so the first step is just getting them out on the table. And you don't have to think at this point, but how could we do it? That's not part of this.
Yes.
We can do that later.
Yes.
This is just what could we do?
I do think that my natural wiring, I think you'll agree with me on this, is I do think that I always look at things from an angle of, but how could we make that happen? I do think there is a certain type of personality, i.e. Mr. Allwood, who is wired to, because he's like an Enneagram 8, which is the challenger. So he instantly, his propensity is to always come at it from, well, that's not going to work because, and I'm not saying I'm right or he's right, but I will say that if you have a tendency to be one of those people who's like, the glass is always full and the birds are always chirping and there's always great ideas and everything can work, you are going to love a non-judgment zone meeting. I did write down just like a couple of like best practices, if you will. And so I thought I'd just zip through those really quickly.
Sure.
Like Nell said, we do set a time limit and we try to crank out as many ideas as possible. And when I was actually like looking up some things on the internet, that's how I stumbled across the fact that like people already call these no judgment zone meetings. I didn't know, but there are lots of like parameters sometimes that people put into place. And what I think is amazing is that we were brilliant enough to have just kind of stumbled across those without even knowing that there was like a format. So I will say this too, and Nell has to kind of stop me a lot of times, is that you're only looking to solve one problem or talk about one thing at a time, because I get so distracted, don't I?
Can I tell everyone a story?
Please
tell the other day, Jen was on a Voxer and she said squirrel, and there was literally a squirrel outside. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is life of being friends with Jen. And like, because so many times she has like a squirrel moment, but this was like an actual living squirrel. And she stopped her Voxer and she was like, squirrel. And I was like, oh, this is a visual representation
of my life. And so I was Voxering with you guys. Okay. You know how you're like, how much do I share on a podcast? Because things will be highly frowned upon. Well, we tend to have a squirrel problem at our house. You know this. We had to call a critter control last year.
It was like
they had to set traps.
Yeah.
Yes. So sometimes Mr. Magic, AKA I call him like the Christian version of Rip off Yellowstone. Right. Like he'll take matters into his own hands because he's protecting the fort. And how do we need to get rid of the squirrels? Right. Well, so he is currently out of town and I'm Voxering with you guys, and he will sit on squirrel patrol now. He's like, he tries to trap them. He's got little nuts out on our deck. He draws them in. And so I'm like, oh, we haven't seen a squirrel in a couple of weeks. And as soon as Jason leaves town, now there's a squirrel again. So that's why I literally saw a squirrel. And then I don't even think I came back to our Voxer.
I don't think you did either. But anyway, so all of that to say, we do try to keep these meetings to solving one problem at a time, just because otherwise, it's even extra crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. We try to make sure that there's just one speaker at a time. And that we are encouraging wild ideas. So it's not going to work if you're trying to like think of only the logical ways to fix an issue in your business, or the logical way to launch something new, or the logical whatever. So wild ideas are highly, highly encouraged.
And this is one of those times that if you have an idea, 100% always say it. If you have a thought on someone else's idea, sometimes we just keep our mouth closed. Yes. Like this is one of those, like you don't have to have every thought that comes to your head as far as what someone else might say. Sometimes we just keep that to ourselves. And later on you can be like, I don't think that would work. But in this time, everything's on the table. So any idea you say, any thought you have on someone else's idea, maybe you don't say.
Yeah. I will tell you who could not do this meeting is my daughter, Ari. Because everything she thinks now comes right out of her mouth. It comes right out of her mouth. We're working really hard on not calling out the obvious. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like she said something to my mom once about, all of her wrinkles on her forehead. And she has talked to people who, are in, let's just not even give any more examples here, but I'm like, honey, you can think it and you can whisper it to mom later.
Everything doesn't have to be said.
Exactly. So in the meeting, same thing.
Mhm.
We try to make sure we don't have a lot of other things going on at the same time in terms of technology, that everybody's dialed in, to what we're doing. And I know like on the internet, it said that we should definitely like be visual with Post-it notes and colors. And we don't do that.
No, we do take notes. I mean, we take a lot of notes.
We take it into a Google Doc.
Mhm.
And I should have mentioned this in my notes. We all have the Google Doc opened
Open.
on our screen at the same time that we are, on our Zoom call. That way we're all adding notes at the same time. So it's just like a big, huge hot mess. But then, like Nell said, like the next step then is to kind of create like a follow-up plan, like a second meeting where you kind of go through and you decide, okay, based on yesterday, like what did you enjoy? What did you enjoy? What do you think will work? What do you think? What can we put together? What is literally a, an absolute no? And so those are kind of the only guidelines we have. Can you think of anything else that I should have mentioned?
No, I think that really that mapping out the second plan, like when you finish the meeting, you should know what's coming up next. So like on that meeting, say, okay, we're going to meet again on Thursday, or everyone's going to, Nell's going to research this, Jen's going to research this, Mackenzie's going to research this, and we're going to come back together, or we're going to, like making sure that there's a plan for that, I think is really important.
Otherwise, we just have open loops all over the place again.
Right. And open loops are just a mess.
And open loops are a mess. So Nell, if we have people listening who right now are just currently doing business by themselves, and I know that's, a large percentage. I started out just doing business by myself. So how could they do a no judgment zone meeting with themselves? What would you tell them to do? Because in my head, I'm like, grab a piece of piece of paper and a pen, or just the notes on your phone or something, and just literally start brain dumping.
Yeah, I am a huge fan of Post-it notes. Like when I do stuff myself, like I was just showing Jen the other day, these are Post-it notes I have to process today. Because I write everything down on Post-it notes. So you could do it on Post-it notes.
I only have 2 today.
You could do it, anywhere that you like to say things, but I would follow the same rules. I would let yourself know ahead of time you're doing it. Like, don't spring it on yourself, put it on your calendar that, tomorrow at noon, and then set a timer for 30 minutes and get a piece of paper or Post-it notes, something, and just you write down every single thought. And it's like, think you can even be like, if I had a business partner, if I was talking to my mom about this, if I was talking to my husband about this, what would be all of the ideas? And this is a time, I think, if you do have friends who like wouldn't mind, who maybe they're not business people, but they like to be in life. Yeah. Because you're going to get wild ideas from them that you're going to say, I could never do that. They're not in business. They don't know. I could never do that. But that might be the key to one of the ideas that's going to be really helpful.
Yeah. I think at some point I am going to still do a podcast now. I know I've mentioned super responsible people on podcasts a lot. I've mentioned it in my book because I've always found myself to be a super responsible person. And so I think sometimes like having that bend makes you automatically want to go, okay, but we could never, And so what's interesting is that's hard when you're also a creative. So a super responsible creative, those are like 2 polar opposites. Do you realize that? And so there's a constant rub there. And so, so I especially encourage those of you who are creatives, if you're working by yourself, like sit down and really do exactly what Nell said. Give yourself 30 minutes and just allow yourself to dream of, in a perfect world, the thing I would do is, or in a perfect world, what could this look like? Or in a perfect wild world, like how would I shut that thing down or start that thing up or create, something completely from scratch. And I think it's a super phenomenal, also fun way to just try to kind of either solve an issue or come up with something new. So
yeah. We want to give 2 other tips real quick. One, because you were saying like those prompts of like in a perfect world. Another one is if I was starting today. Because sometimes we've done something, in our business for so long, we think we can't change it. And so it's like, if I didn't have any of that baggage, like if I was coming in from this clean, how would I do it? And then you're going to see like, oh, well, maybe I could make a change to get to that. And so like thinking of those prompts. And then one other thing I want to say, because I'm always giving a plug for like ChatGPT, especially if you're doing this on your own, but have it like, give me 100 ways to blank. and then just go through that. And once again, some of them might be total junk, but they might spur another idea. So if you're having a brainstorming meeting, especially if you're by yourself or a no judgment zone meeting, use like a chat bot to help spur you on and get you some ideas too. But all of those kind of prompts of, if I've never done this before, what would I do? If in a perfect world, what would this look like?
Yep.
All of those kind of
I
things.
love that question. You actually asked me that about a program a while back. You said, in a perfect world, if we were starting over from scratch, what would this look like? And I was like, ooh, like that feels exciting. So I was like, I wouldn't do that. I would do more of this. I wouldn't do that. And so super fun. So, okay. Well, I hope this was helpful for somebody. It was helpful for me because I got to spend time with Nell. And, but I don't you think that we should do a part 2 at some point, which is just like how you run our team meetings?
And what kind of meetings we have, who's invited to what. I'm happy to do that. I would love to.
What those look like. And just because, for a while we would just, we didn't have team meetings. And then for a while we would just jump on a Zoom call. And then we had to kind of at some point get just the tiniest bit of structure, and not everyone is super structured, but I do think the way that you run our meetings would be really helpful to a lot of people. So thanks for being here, ma'am.
Thank you for having me. Anytime.
You're welcome. And so for those of you who are watching on YouTube, like, will you leave us a comment below, even if it's just hashtag Nell for president, which is, we always say here at Team Allwood, because she's brilliant. If you are listening to it someplace else and you have a friend who has a business, who's maybe stumped on something or trying, to get out of a creative slump, send this podcast episode to them if you would, and hopefully it will be helpful to them. So we will see you all next week. Thank you, my friends. Bye-bye. You're smart.
We're so good at that.